Well, we are on our next session here, which will be also on creating a new start for us, which is activating the body's healing blueprint. Now, this is quite interesting and it follows through to what we were saying. So we're going to welcome on stage Mr. Christian. Mr. Christian, you here? Right here? All right, welcome. Thank you. Please give them a big round of applause.
Thank you so much. Thank you for Dr. Selena, Dr. Vivek for the invitation to be here. I think an organization like Disruptive Doctors is absolutely crucial to help bring a deep metamorphosis of medicine, because I remember when I was a kid, so in the 1960s, 1970s, there was, at least in America, there was this huge epidemics of heart disease, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and the campaigns came on to tell people to do more exercise, stop smoking, reduce stress, reduce meat, eat more vegetables. Then we discovered the whole concept of cholesterol. And then we came on with statins drugs and drugs for hypertension, drugs for everything. And fast forward 5 decades later, and still the biggest problem in the world is still heart disease, cardiovascular disease. Nothing has changed. You know, they say the definition of insanity is continuing to do the same thing and expecting different outcome. We have an insane medicine. And I think we need to change all of this, and the whole science behind stem cells is really giving us this leverage of changing that medicine. So if I say stem cells, for most people it means an injection. It means you go somewhere, you get an injection of stem cells, and the big questions are, which stem cells are the best, what's the best treatment, and where do we put them back in the body? And yet this is really just the tip of the iceberg. The science of stem cells goes so much deeper, and that's really what I want to share with you. But before I dive into this, I want to show you a video. I want to really shock your mind with this video. So this is the work of Doris Taylor. She circulated digestive enzymes on the cardiac muscle on the heart of a mouse. And after, 10, 12 hours, all the muscle is completely digested. The only thing that is left is the connective tissue of the heart, the soft skeleton on the heart. And on that connective tissue that still retains the trace that it was a heart, they simply laid out bone marrow stem cells isolated from that animal. And within about a week, they have a beating heart in the test tube. This is the power of your stem cells now sitting in, as you sit here and listening to this whole presentation. So the question that we oftentimes ask, which is, are stem cells real? Are stem cells really working? This is the wrong question. The real question is, what is standing in the way? What are the obstacles for stem cells to really do this in our body? Why don't we get that level of repair in our bodies? And we'll go through some of that today. So, in essence, what we really need to understand, and of course I'm going to go over a lot of science or skip a lot of science and just jump to the conclusion because I don't have tons of time. Stem cells are the body's repair system. So let that sink in. Just like the human body has an immune system, the human body has a repair system. There's a point in the not too distant future, I hope, in med school, you will have a new system in the body, which is the repair system. If you get, and these studies were done on bone fracture, burn to the skin, injury to the skin, stroke, heart attacks. These are the models that were studied, but after any injury, within the next, let's say, 10, 12 hours, we can pick up specific compounds in the bloodstream. Granulocyte colony stimulating factor, stem cell factor, interleukin-8. These compounds are very well known to go to the bone marrow, trigger the release of stem cells from the bone marrow. Within 3 to 5 days after a major injury, we can see an increase in the number of stem cells in circulation up to 10-fold. Now, these stem cells don't know where to go. So just like an immune cell that is released from a lymph node, how does it get to go where there's an infection? It follows cytokines, chemokines, same process. The injury will start releasing on the second day SDF1. It is the attractant for stem cells. When stem cells circulate into the fine capillaries of the affected tissue, it releases SDF1, the stem cell has a receptor for it, and it will trigger, upon connection, it will trigger the migration of stem cells out of the blood into that tissue. Upon contact with certain degree of that tissue, stem cells will multiply and transform into cells of that tissue, or release various kinds of growth factors, paracrine effect, that will activate the tissue's own stem cells, which are replenished by bone marrow stem cells. So the whole process comes from the bone marrow, and this is your repair system. And I find this amazing because every single human being, definitely anyone here in the room, we've all experienced that the human body repairs. We've all had a broken bone, a cut, a wound, a bruise, something, and with surgery, and you've all seen that your body repairs. And yet in medicine, it's a black box, like there's no understanding of how it repairs. You get a broken bone, we put you in a cast, we tell you come back in 6 weeks with no understanding or language around what is happening during those 6 weeks. It's your stem cells that are doing the job. So that's what I want to dive into. So your repair system. There are three main elements or factors that matters when we talk about this whole repair system in your body. The number of stem cells is the most relevant parameters. It's not the only one. Once stem cells are released, they need to circulate, they need to be able to migrate, they need to be able to proliferate. But if you simply change that parameter, or you look at that parameter, it's the most determinant. You get two people with the same broken bone, we don't all repair with the same speed, the same efficiency. The one that repairs faster or better is simply the one that naturally has more stem cells in circulation. Which then begs the question, what if you could put more stem cells in circulation? Can we change the course of the disease or help somebody repair? And in the early 2000s, when we thought that bone marrow stem cells were not able to become all kinds of tissues, something that is still floating around in spite of the vast literature to the country, and I'll show you some of that. But as we were thinking about this, most scientists went to find for other sources of stem cells. These cells were not there yet, but anyway, they came later. They're relevant, but umbilical cord stem cells, fetal stem cells, then we went to fat stem cells. And along the way, we realized your bone marrow stem cells can do the job. And if you just release them, you can really boost the body's ability to repair. Had we known this in the early 2000s, I don't think injections would have developed as they have developed as we know it today. So let's dive into this. What if we can put more stem cells in circulation? Can we change development of various kinds of disease? I'll show you just a few examples. This is a study on heart attack. So scientists made a knot on the coronary artery to trigger a heart attack, released that knot, let the animal recover, and divided the animals in two groups. One group controlled, which nothing is done. The other group, we injected the cytokines. Oh, I see that in the transfer of the slide, the letters are black, so you don't see any of it. So this group is controlled, this group gets GCSF and stem cell factor. So they have a massive increase in the number of stem cells in circulation. And if we look at the control group, 2 weeks later, a month later, you can see severe scar tissue in the ventricular wall, no new blood vessels, 17% survival, and very severe signs of cardiomyopathy. In the group that just had more stem cells in circulation, renewal of the ventricular wall, new blood vessels tapping in the other ventricles, 73% survival, and normalized cardiovascular function. In the world, there's nothing that we can do to help somebody recover from a heart attack, and I'll show you more data a little bit later, but here's a study showing you just put more stem cells in circulation and the heart can completely repair. If you look at enlargement of the heart as a consequence of heart attack, same thing. You inject GCSF, you release stem cells, and you can see the heart gets back its normal size. If you look at cardiac remodeling, fibrosis, scar tissue in the heart, same thing. You inject GCSF and you can see a significant reduction in fibrosis in the heart. Now, let's look at diabetes. To show that stem cells can really have an impact on diabetes, you need to show two things. Your stem cells from your own bone marrow can leave the bone marrow, go to the pancreas, and become insulin-producing cells of your pancreas. Normal insulin-producing cells of your pancreas. If we can show that this exists in the body, then the next question is, if I put more stem cells in circulation, can I boost this natural process to a point where it has an effect on diabetes? So here's a very ingenious study. By the way, I'm not picking up here the one study that shows something in an ocean of studies that show nothing. There's hundreds of those studies out there. I'm picking the ones that within one study can show you visibly the whole process in a very simple way. This is one of those studies, beautiful studies. They took male mice in which they did a genetic mutation. They inserted the gene that codes for green fluorescent protein to the gene for insulin. So any cell in these mice that starts to make insulin, if you shed a light on the animal, they will glow green. So you shed a light on these animals and their pancreas is just glowing green. So they irradiated female mice and then took stem cells from the male mice and injected them in the female mice. So you have female mice whose entire body is made of cells with the double X chromosome, no Y chromosome, and their bone marrow is made of cells that if any of these cells starts to make insulin, I shed a light on it and it will glow green. So about 2 weeks later, they isolated cells from the pancreas. If you look at that cell and you tag for the Y chromosome, it has the Y chromosome, meaning it came from the bone marrow. If you shed a light on it, it glows green, meaning it has transcribed the gene for insulin. And if you use a red dye for insulin, that cell is actually making insulin. And if you look carefully, it's not a Frankenstein cell, it's not an overactive cell, a sluggish cell, it's just a very natural cell of the pancreas. Your pancreas today, at the age that you all have in this room, you don't have one cell in your pancreas that you're born with. They've all been replaced with that natural process. So your stem cells can leave your bone marrow, go to the pancreas. Not only can they do this every day of your life. So now if I put more stem cells in circulation, can I boost this phenomenon to have an impact on diabetes? So this is a normal island of Langerhans. This is Langerhans 24 hours after injection of streptozotocin. So it's a toxin, it's a bacterial toxin that goes to the pancreas, kills the cells that are making insulin. So these animals are now diabetic. So third group, they did the same process, injection of streptozotocin, followed by 2 rounds of endogenous stem cell mobilization, triggering the release of the animal's own stem cells with GCSF. And we can see a partial recovery of these islands of Langerhans, but that's enough for these rats to be normal. They don't need insulin. The same process was done about 15, 16 years ago in 14 individuals recently diagnosed for insulin-dependent diabetes. And of those 14, 13 were independent for insulin for anywhere between 3 to 36 months. At the end of the study, 3 years later, some of them were still independent from insulin. I'm not telling you we've discovered a treatment for insulin. I just want to show you the power of the stem cells that are now sitting in your own bone marrow. Here's another one, Parkinson. So this is so the way to quantify Parkinson in a mouse is that as you look at a mouse in a cage, it will walk, stop for about 10 seconds, then start walking again, stop for 10 seconds, and the time that it stops is an average of about 10 seconds. If you inject 6-hydroxydopamine in the substantia nigra, which kills dopamine neurons in that area of the brain, which is essentially the definition of Parkinson in humans, then you develop Parkinson in the mice, which you will see by a loss of coordination. So the mouse will hesitate to start walking, so it will stop up to, you don't see it very well here, but anyway, the long column. It will stop more than a minute. It will stop and not move for more than a minute. You give them L-DOPA, carbidopa, you can see an improvement of the condition, but if you inject GCSF and trigger the release of their own stem cells, you almost go back to control. In that study, they wanted a way to be able to quantify the loss of coordination. So they put a piece of tape on the nose of the mouse and counted the amount of time that it took to take it off. And in the control group, you can see a learning process after 1 day, 7 days, 2 weeks after the injection of 6-hydroxydopamine. You can see that the control group is actually learning the process, so they're very quick at removing the tape. But in the control Parkinson group, after 2 weeks, about 25 seconds to be able to remove the tape. With L-DOPA, carbidopa, the same evolution of loss of coordination, but it's just slower. With the group where we inject GCSF, the animals release its own stem cells, you see damage to the brain and repair. And I'll show you cases of that later as well in humans. Last one, Alzheimer's. So these are models of mice that will spontaneously develop Alzheimer's after about 4 to 6 months of age. So you take a normal mouse, so they put them in a maze, and they make them go through the maze. So they will go through the maze within about like 13 seconds, and after the 4th attempt, then they will take something like 6 seconds. So they've learned the whole thing, and now they can do the maze much more effectively. You test them 6 months later, they give you the same performance. Now you take an Alzheimer's mouse, at 2 months of age, it performs perfectly, but at 6 months, it's lacking. It has cognitive deficit. Now you take those exact same mice, and you simply inject GCSF for them to trigger the release of their own stem cells. At 2 months, they function like a normal mouse, and at 6 months, they function like a normal mouse. So just again to show you data available in the literature on the impact on the release of stem cells. I can show you similar data touching many other different kinds of diseases. The point is if you can put more stem cells in circulation, you boost the body's ability to repair. But the most relevant of everything that I want to tell you today here is what comes next, which is as we study how stem cells repair in the body, and we increase the number of stem cells in circulation, they will primarily go to the area where there's tissue damage. But in the background, they actually go everywhere. And something that has emerged from these studies, which is not new as a concept, it's new in terms of having data to support this concept, is you've heard these sentences, we have a new body every year, every 7 years, every 12 years. The reality is that we've got every tissue and organ of the body has its own turnover rate. You get a new skin every month, a new liver every 2-3 years, a new pancreas 4 to 6 years. Even the heart that was believed, believed, and this is what you're still taught, I believe, in med school, to be a post-mitotic organ. After 10 years of age, the heart that you have is what you have. If you have an injury, you cannot repair. Now we know that the heart actually renews at a rate of about 1% a year, which is very significant, which is the last point. So the first 2 points are more stem cells in circulation are better. The last point is if you happen to have fewer circulation, then you are at risk for developing diseases. Because if you constantly have tissue turnover, meaning you lose cells every day in your tissues, you need to have enough stem cells in circulation to offset that cellular loss. But we are born with red matter that makes stem cells, and very early in life, red matter converts into fatty matter that does not make stem cells. By age 15, we've lost 50% of our red matter. By age 30, 90% of our red matter. There's a point in our 30s, 40s, we have all experienced this. If you're not 30 or 40 yet, it will come, you don't have to worry. You start to realize you just don't recover as well as you used to. The same injury that you had 20 years ago, now it lingers a little bit longer. You go to the gym now and you just don't recover as fast. It's because you don't have enough stem cells to offset cellular loss. But it also means you don't have enough stem cells to offset the normal process of tissue turnover. So you start to accumulate deficits in various tissues, which is the definition of age-related diseases. Diabetes is the loss of cells making insulin. Parkinson's, the loss of cells making dopamine. Hypothyroidism, the loss of cells making T3, T4, and so on. So the idea came about 13 years ago. I published this in the scientific literature, that the natural decline, age-related decline in the number of stem cells in circulation is the fundamental cause of the formation of age-related diseases. And in that paper, I said, there's a way to test for this. Let's go and count the number of stem cells in the blood circulation of people who have developed various age-related disease, and it should be less than what you find in a healthy person of the same age, because keep in mind that in most blood parameters, if you look at red blood cells, for example, I'm not a clinician, but you look at the range, the normal range of red blood cells, and it's what, 8,000 to 13, 15,000, like the range between the low and the high is rarely more than 2-3-fold. In our studies, we have found people with as little as 0.01 stem cells per microliter and people with 5 stem cells per microliter. A 500-fold range difference between a low and a high level. So that means if you're at the lower end, you don't have enough stem cells to offset that turnover rate and you'll develop diseases. Now these studies, about 50 of them have been done, and if you can read here, all these diseases, people with these problems have statistically less than 50% of the number of stem cells that you find in a healthy person of the same age. So my conclusion here, picking a little bit of data from the site, there's tons of the data. I showed you tidbits of it, is that more stem cells in circulation means your body has a greater ability to repair today if it has a problem, and to keep the health that you have today for decades to come. Because, for example, take the talk, very interesting talk before about the blue zone. We talk about longevity. What is longevity? The one common denominator with all centenarians, super centenarians, they have not developed an age-related disease until a few months before they pass. Anything that will delay the onset of age-related disease will give you longevity and health span with that longevity. Putting more stem cells in circulation is probably the greatest strategy for delaying the onset of these problems. So how do we put more stem cells in circulation? This is where I started my work in the world of stem cell research. I was working with a few plants. So this one, this blue-green algae, this was, so you'll see some of the images of the environment. So in 1995, I was hired to study this plant to see how it was working in the body. And it was right after the passage of regulation in America, documenting, not documenting, but requesting company promoting a product to have scientific data behind their marketing message. So I started to study this plant. The main benefits were inflammation, immune support, and cognitive function. We very quickly identified the main mechanisms of action. But as I'm doing this work, I came across people reversing multiple sclerosis, heart disease, diabetes, severe COPD, Parkinson, Alzheimer's. I mean, there's a point where either of these cases are not true, or this plant is doing something out of the ordinary. And I came across enough of these cases that they were real. So I'll go fast here. After about 4 or 5 years of research, at some point I came across an article early January 2001 documenting for the first time stem cells going from the bone marrow to the brain and becoming a brain cell. And with some of the data and the literature at that time, the idea comes to simply understand that it looks like stem cells are the repair system of the body. So we published an article about this in the scientific literature, and in the back of my mind, the thought was, well, if stem cells are the repair system of the body, and I have a plan that boosts the release of stem cells, then stem cells will go into the pancreas of the diabetic, the heart patient, and so on. So we bought a flow cytometer that allows counting stem cells, and we started to work on ourselves, counting the number of stem cells, took this blue-green algae, counted stem cells an hour, 2 hours later, and we saw the whole phenomenon. It was a stem cell mobilizer. So it releases stem cells. So we finished all the work on this one, and then I started to travel in the world to find other plants having an effect on stem cells, and in my travel in Madagascar, there is one species of 65 species of aloe. There is one that they use in Madagascar to make a product called the Hona that is used for a broad variety of health problems. So we studied it. I'll go a little bit faster here. You won't show all the video, but we basically studied that species of aloe, and we see a very strong response in terms of stem cell mobilization. At some point, I'm traveling in China, and I meet Chinese biochemists that work with plants from the Chinese pharmacopoeia, and I said, okay, you're lost on an island, you can only bring one plant. What would it be? I was just curious what they would say. All three said sea buckthorn berry. I was surprised, but I dove into literature, and the literature, Tibetan medicine, Mongolian medicine, Chinese medicine, is showing a broad variety of benefits. So I went up there, I developed a relationship with a farm, we developed an extract, we tested it, and we see an increase in the number of stem cells in circulation. So I continued like this and identified a number of plants that boost the release of stem cells from the bone marrow. So the product that we have, STEMREGEN release, is the top 5 plants that trigger the release of stem cells from the bone marrow. So you take 2 capsules, and you will roughly have about you'll double the number of stem cells in circulation. Roughly, for a 50-year-old, let's say 10 million additional stem cells in circulation. What does that mean? Now, with all the data that we saw before, we started a study on stable chronic congestive heart failure. Let's go back to see if this is giving us what we have seen in animals. So people with 2 years of chronic stable congestive heart failure, we give them 2 capsules 3 times a day. 6 months later, all 10. We continue to study, it's ongoing, but this is the data of the first 10 patients. It was published a few months ago. All 10 have normal ejection fraction, normal cardiac function after 6 months. So we've seen a lot of cases on Parkinson. You'll see now one of them. So on the basis of those kinds of cases, the first 2 videos, you'll see this man, 15 years of evolution of Parkinson, and the rest of the videos that you will see is 6 weeks after taking 2 capsules 3 times a day. So on the basis of that case, then we developed a full study now on Parkinson. It's ongoing. So the data that I have is only the first 7 patients. So now he can dress on his own, eat on his own, drive his car, basically resume a normal life. So this is the data, preliminary data. But when we look at sleep disturbance, anxiety, depression, tremor, balance, all the parameters, grip strength, all the parameters associated with Parkinson, we see an improvement of 40 to 60% in these different parameters. One video here that I just wanted to show you because you know very well in medicine, if you get a spinal cord lesion, it cannot repair. So this is 15 years after being pushing out of a car. She can lift her right leg a little bit, absolutely zero movement in the left leg. We ask her to move her left leg, and it's the right that moves a little bit. She can move her arm a little bit, but she needs to ring a bell to be able to turn in her bed. So this is 8 months later. She took as much, we told her, take as much as you want. She took four capsules 3 times a day. So you can see now lateral movement, bending at the knee, both legs, and the next video after, I wish I could speed it up, but you'll see her in her bed where she's basically using the weight of her leg to grab her leg and be able to turn right, left, and even sit in her bed, scoot back, hold the book, eat on her own. We're talking about somebody for 15 years, medicine could not do anything. She's living with the consequence of that accident. And within less than a year of just releasing her own stem cells, she's improving dramatically. Now, what if we were to use this in a hospital setting with a fresh injury in physical therapy? In any case. And the last one, I'll be quick. This is just a sort of the typical example of what repair is in the body. Somebody was trying to open the floor with a round saw. It bounced and landed on his thigh. So about 20 centimeters long. You don't see it very well. 20 centimeters well, about 2 centimeters deep. So he was told it would take about 4 to 6 weeks before he can stand on his leg, and another 4 to 6 weeks before he can walk normally. This is 8 days. He took 2 capsules every 3 hours, all around the clock. Probably not when he slept. And this is the scar 16 days later. Better than most C-section done in the OR with a scalpel, because your ability to repair depends entirely on how many stem cells you have in circulation. If you don't have enough stem cells, the fibroblasts will kick in and you will get fibrous tissue and keloid scar. You have enough stem cells in circulation, you get muscle, capillaries, skin, all the normal feature of a tissue. So the overall conclusion here is simply to know if you can increase the number of stem cells in circulation, you can boost the body's ability to repair. So for various reasons, we were not able to have a booth here, but there's an opportunity, there's a discount, well, a whole package that is offered to you if you're interested to use the product in your clinic. And as you leave the door, you will see 3 young ladies with a blue shirt. They will have a QR code. If you scan that QR code, there's a bottle for you at the booth for Disruptive Doctor. And if you have any questions, I will be there as well.
All right, once again, a big round of applause to Mr. Christian Drapeau, Founder and Chief Science Officer for STEMREGEN. Now, do we have any questions that we can have from the floor? Any questions so far? Oh, yes, right here. And we do have our slider also on stage. Now you will see the transition. Here you go, yeah?
Just want to ask, by using or taking your supplements, which is plant-based, do you think we need infusions of the stem cells while we are living now?
In the heart study, in reality, the heart study has 3 groups. STEMREGEN, stem cell injection, and a combination of both. Because we want to show how does releasing your own stem cells compare to an injection, and what is the synergy of using both. Because with doctors that we're working with, it's clear that the synergy works better, but we have not quantified it so far. So we have not published that data yet, but basically what the data is showing is that releasing your own stem cells will do something comparable to an injection, but if you combine both, you get much better results. So the data, basically, if I summarize all of this in one line, I would say, if you can afford a stem cell injection, you'd be foolish to not use STEMREGEN with it. If you cannot afford a stem cell injection, releasing your own will do a really good job. But we do not do stem cell injection. Everything that I showed here today, all the data, nothing was with an injection. It was all by triggering the release of your own stem cells or an animal's own stem cells.
Mr. Christian, we have some questions from the floor that are on screen. How do you measure the stem cell level in the body?
In the body, just to be clear, we measure it in the bloodstream, and we use flow cytometry, which is really the method to quantify stem cells. It's a machine, stem cells line up in a tube, there's a laser that shines on the cell, and using different markers, different colors, antibodies, basically marking of cells, then we can identify which cells in there are stem cells, what kind of stem cells, and so on. So we increase mesenchymal stem cells, CD34 stem cells, V cells, and endothelial progenitor cells. These are the main ones that we increase in the bloodstream. Very quickly, the protocols, people come to the lab, they rest for about an hour, then we take a blood sample, then we give them placebo or the plant that we're testing, then we take another blood sample an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours later. They come back a week later, we do the exact same thing, giving them whichever we did not give the first time, and we use the placebo to determine their normal circadian cycle, because your number of stem cells is not equal throughout the day, and then we basically see what the plant has done above and beyond their normal circadian cycle. So that's how we quantify the number of stem cells.
Thank you. Our next one here is any precautions in patients with cancer? Or is there any baseline blood to take prior?
There's no issue with cancer whatsoever. I can answer this in many ways. Let me mention it this way. We did a study because of that concern in the early days with the first ingredient that we had, and when we gave 10 times the recommended amount to humans after implanting human breast cancer cells in mice, what we saw after 6 weeks is a 30% reduction in tumor growth, which is honestly what we have seen over the years. One of the most commonly reported benefit is tumor suppression. We don't promote it, we don't talk about it, we have no intent of marketing it in any way, shape, or form, but it's enough to basically say there's absolutely no issue with cancer. And if you go in a deep dive of all the plants that are part of STEMREGEN, actually all these plants have wide documentation of their anti-cancer properties. They're all used for cancer. So the answer is absolutely no risk.
All right, we'll go to one more question before we carry on. Let's go here. Is there a role in patients who have multiple allergies? The last one, right?
We have seen, it's very interesting. There's a lot, for me, when I started in this, stem cells repair. Anything that is tissue damage, we can explain the benefits. Other things are a little bit more nebulous, like how could you explain that releasing your own stem cells remove, for example, bone growths in rheumatoid arthritis, remove cysts. There are things that, to this day, I cannot fully explain. However, we've seen results with a lot of conditions like allergies, asthma, autoimmune problems. It's probably where we saw the greatest amount of results. And the one just before about prevention, the reason why I talked about the fact that the number of stem cells in circulation is linked to the development of age-related disease, it's because, to me, this is the greatest thing. If we know something that is going to keep you healthy, whatever health you have today, for decades to come, it's going to completely change the face of the earth in terms of health and wellness. It changes our understanding of health, wellness, disease formation, longevity, and it's called to change the way that we practice medicine if we just let that sink in. So I've been taking this product every day for about 30 years now. I'm 94, so it's a joke.
Yes, you can laugh now. You're free to laugh. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, please give them a big round of applause to Mr. Christian Drapeau.